My alarm screamed at 2:45 in the morning. I slapped it silent and dragged myself out of bed, every muscle protesting. 16 hours at Boston Animal Emergency Clinic yesterday. And here I was starting another double shift because Dr. Martinez called in sick again. The diabetes didn't care that I was exhausted. I stumbled to the bathroom, checked my basic glucose monitor, and cursed under my breath. Already running lower than I liked. Coffee first, insulin second. Food, never, apparently, because I was perpetually late. The drive to the clinic took 20 minutes through empty streets slick with the first hints of rain. November in Boston meant unpredictable weather and unpredictable blood sugar, both of which I'd learned to manage badly. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Foster, the senior veterinarian who'd become something between a mentor and the older sister I never had. Golden retriever hit by car coming in. Needs surgeon. Can you stay? I texted back a thumbs up, even though staying meant pushing my turnaround time to dangerous territory. The dog needed me more than I needed sleep. That's what I told myself anyway, while my glucose monitor beeped its passive-aggressive reminder that I'd skipped dinner again. The retriever arrived 15 minutes after I did, carried in by a sobbing college student who'd hit him while driving home from a party. The dog's name was Murphy. He had kind brown eyes and a fractured pelvis, an internal bleeding that meant surgery now or never. Sarah met me in the prep room, her silver-streaked hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. At 53, she'd seen every kind of emergency imaginable and maintained the calm I desperately tried to emulate. "Dr. Park is on his way," she said, already pulling up Murphy's x-rays on the tablet. "But he's 40 minutes out. Can you stabilize until then?" "Already on it." The next hours blurred into controlled chaos. Murphy crashed twice on the table. We brought him back both times. Dr. Park arrived and took over the surgery while I assisted, my hands steady even as my vision started getting the telltale blur that meant my blood sugar was dropping. I ignored it. The dog came first. By the time we closed Murphy up and transferred him to recovery, dawn was breaking outside the windows. I'd been on shift for almost 19 hours. My monitor was screaming now. But Murphy was breathing steadily, his vitals strong, and that mattered more than the tremor starting in my hands. Sarah found me in the break room, trying to remember where I'd put my emergency glucose tablets. "You look like death," she said, not unkindly. "Feel worse." I finally located the tablets in my bag, under a stack of veterinary journals I kept meaning to read. But Murphy's stable. That's what matters. "Murphy is stable because you're brilliant and stubborn. Those qualities will also get you killed if you don't take care of yourself." She handed me a granola bar from her personal stash. "Eat, now, and then go home before you pass out in my clinic." "I'm fine." "Hannah." She used the voice that made junior vets snap to attention. "You saved a dog's life tonight. Don't make me have to save yours." I ate the granola bar. The glucose tablets followed. My monitor stopped screaming, but the exhaustion settled deeper into my bones. 3 in the morning again, only this time I'd been awake since yesterday morning. The storm had arrived while I was elbow-deep in surgery. Rain hammered against the clinic windows, wind howling between buildings. November storms in Boston came fast and mean, turning streets into rivers within minutes. I checked the weather on my phone while pulling on my jacket. Severe thunderstorm warning until 6 a.m. Flooding in low-lying areas. Perfect. My car was parked 3 blocks away, because the clinic lot had been full when I arrived yesterday. 3 blocks that suddenly felt like 3 miles. I'd grab my umbrella from the car and drive home carefully. Take a hot shower. Sleep for at least 6 hours. Maybe call my mom in Arizona tomorrow and pretend everything was fine. The rain hit me the second I pushed through the clinic doors. Not rain, actually. Water falling from the sky with violence, each drop a tiny assault. My scrubs soaked through immediately. The wind tried to tear my jacket off my back. I put my head down and ran. 2 blocks felt like running through a car wash. The 3rd block was worse. Water streamed over the sidewalks, carrying city debris and miniature rivers. My sneakers squelched with every step. I couldn't see more than a few yards ahead through the downpour. The tremor started in my left hand first, then my right. Not from cold, though I was freezing. This was different. This was my blood sugar dropping again despite the granola bar and glucose tablets. Stress sometimes did this, burned through glucose faster than I could replace it. Exhaustion made it worse. I dug in my jacket pocket for more tablets. Found the empty wrapper instead. Had I eaten them all already? My thoughts moved like honey, thick and slow. Wrong. That was wrong. I kept emergency supplies everywhere specifically for moments like this. My bag. There were more in my bag. I stopped under a streetlight, fumbled with the zipper. Everything inside was soaked. The tablets had dissolved into glucose sludge at the bottom. My phone was wet. My wallet was wet. Everything was wet and useless, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The sidewalk tilted under my feet. I grabbed the streetlight pole for support. The metal was slick with rain. My vision narrowed at the edges, tunnel vision closing in. This was bad. This was dangerously bad. I needed to sit down. Needed to get somewhere dry. Needed to call for help. I fumbled my phone out, tried to unlock it. My fingers weren't working properly. The screen was too wet. The password was suddenly impossible to remember. Was it Mom's birthday or mine? Why couldn't I remember my own birthday? My knees buckled. I went down hard, palms hitting the concrete. Pain registered distantly. The rain kept falling. I tried to get up. My legs wouldn't cooperate. This was how it happened sometimes. Diabetics found unconscious in weird places because they'd pushed too hard, ignored too many warning signs. I managed to roll onto my side. The streetlight above me blurred into a halo of light through the rain. Beautiful, actually. Strange thought to have while dying. But there it was. The water pooling around me was cold. I should probably try to get up again. In a minute. Just needed to rest for a minute. The world faded to gray, then darker gray, then nothing at all. Consciousness came back in pieces. Cold water on my face. Something hard under my back. Movement. The sensation of being lifted, carried. Strong arms under my knees and shoulders. The rain still falling, but somehow distant now. I tried to open my eyes. Managed slits. Saw the interior of a car. Leather seats. Expensive. The scent of something woodsy. Masculine. Someone was talking, voice low and urgent. Not talking to me. Talking on a phone. I need Carson. Now. I don't care what time it is. Wake him up. The voice was deep, controlled, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. Or just East Coast money. The kind of voice used to being obeyed immediately. I have a woman. Found her unconscious in the storm. She's wearing a medical alert bracelet. Type 1 diabetic. A pause. I already gave her some juice. She's breathing but not fully conscious. How long until he can get here? Another pause. I felt the car moving, smooth and fast. My head was pillowed on something soft. A jacket. His jacket. Too long. Tell him to meet me at my place. And have him bring everything he needs to treat severe hypoglycemia. The phone call ended. I tried to speak. Managed something between a moan and a whimper. Immediately the man's face appeared above mine. All I could make out were dark eyes and strong features. He said something I didn't catch. Stay with me. He repeated louder. You're going to be fine, but I need you to drink this. Something sweet and cold pressed against my lips. Orange juice. I drank automatically, some primal survival instinct taking over. The liquid burned going down. I coughed, drank more. He supported my head with one hand, patient and steady. Good. Keep drinking. I finished the juice box. My brain started firing synapses in something resembling proper order. I was in a car. A stranger's car. Being driven somewhere by someone I couldn't see clearly. Every self-defense class I'd ever taken screamed danger. But I was also alive when I'd been dying on that sidewalk. So maybe danger was relative. Where? I managed to croak out. Somewhere safe and dry. The man's voice again, calm and certain. I'm taking you to my home. My doctor will be there. Hospital. The word came out clearer. Take me to a hospital. Hospitals ask questions, make reports. You'll be safer with me. If you don't stabilize in the next 15 minutes, I'll take you to Mass General myself, he added, already checking the timer on his watch. My doctor is en route either way. That should have terrified me. Instead, my traitorous brain latched onto the word safer and decided to trust it. The juice was working. I could feel my blood sugar climbing back toward normal. My vision cleared enough to actually see the man now. Dark hair, maybe black, swept back from a face that belonged on Roman statues. Strong jaw, straight nose, lips that looked cruel until he spoke, and then softened just slightly. But it was his eyes that held me. Deep brown, almost black, intense in a way that made me feel seen. Actually seen, not just looked at. "Who are you?" I whispered. "Someone who found you when you needed finding." He reached past me, pulled something from the floor. My bag, soaked and pathetic. "I need to check your identification. Don't panic." He went through my bag with efficient movements, found my wallet, pulled out my license. I watched him study it, watched his expression shift subtly as he read. "Hannah Mitchell, 28, veterinarian." His eyes met mine. "You were a long way from home in that storm. Work." My tongue felt thick but functional. "The clinic, emergency surgery. You saved lives and nearly lost your own doing it." Something in his voice suggested he understood that particular brand of self-destruction. Noble, foolish, but noble. The car slowed, turned. Through the window I could see gates opening, wrought iron and security cameras. We were definitely not going to a hospital. We were going somewhere private and protected, and probably expensive based on the glimpse of manicured grounds I caught before the rain obscured everything again. "I'm calling the police," I said, with more strength than I felt. "No, you're not." He said it kindly, but with absolute certainty. "Your phone is dead from the water, and you're in no condition to walk anywhere. So you're going to let my doctor examine you, make sure you're stable, and then we'll discuss what happens next. This is kidnapping. This is rescue. There's a difference." The car stopped. He killed the engine. "I'm going to carry you inside. You're going to let me. Because the alternative is trying to walk on your own and passing out again in my driveway." He was right. I hated that he was right. My legs felt like water. My head still swam. The juice had stabilized me, but I was far from recovered. And despite every warning bell, despite the strangeness of this entire situation, I didn't feel afraid. Not of him. Just confused and exhausted and grateful to be alive. "Okay," I heard myself say. "But if you murder me, I'm haunting you forever." He actually smiled then. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger and dangerously attractive. "Fair warning," he said, and lifted me from the car like I weighed nothing at all. 3 days passed before the package arrived. 3 days of going through the motions at work while my brain replayed that night on an endless loop. The man carrying me through his mansion, Dr. Carson, his private physician, checking my vitals with practiced efficiency. The guest room where I'd slept for 6 hours straight while rain battered the windows. And Christopher Ravellini himself, sitting in a chair beside the bed when I woke, watching me with those impossibly dark eyes. He'd driven me home at dawn, walked me to my door, said he'd be in touch, and then disappeared like something I'd hallucinated during the hypoglycemic episode. Except the new continuous glucose monitor I found on my dresser when I got inside was very, very real. The delivery came on a Tuesday morning, right in the middle of a routine exam on a German shepherd with an ear infection. The receptionist poked her head into the exam room. "Hannah, there's a delivery for you. The guy says it's medical equipment." I excused myself, leaving the shepherd with his relieved owner. At the front desk, a man in an expensive suit held a sleek black box. He didn't smile, didn't make small talk, just handed me the box and a small white card, then left before I could sign anything. The card was simple. Heavy stock, no name or logo. Just elegant script that said, "So you never have to choose between saving lives and saving your own. See." Inside the box was a Dexcom G7, the newest model. The kind with real-time alerts that sync to your phone. The kind that cost thousands of dollars and usually required months of insurance authorization that I'd been fighting for over a year. Sarah appeared at my shoulder, peering into the box. "Is that what I think it is? If you're thinking it's way too expensive for me to accept from a stranger, Then yes, the mysterious man from the storm? She'd dragged the whole story out of me the day after it happened. The one who lives in a mansion and has a private doctor on call at 3 a.m? That would be him. Sarah picked up the card, read it, and gave me a look that said volumes about what she thought of mysterious wealthy men bearing expensive gifts. You're going to give it back. Of course I'm going to give it back. I closed the box, feeling oddly disappointed even as I said it. This is like a month's rent. I can't accept something like this from someone I barely know. Someone who saved your life. That doesn't mean I owe him thousands of dollars in medical equipment. Sarah studied me with the expression she reserved for junior vets making questionable decisions about treatment plans. You've been checking your glucose every hour since that night. You're scared it'll happen again. This monitor could prevent that. I'm fine with my current system. Your current system almost got you killed. She wasn't wrong. My basic monitor had failed me. Or I'd failed it. Either way, the result had been the same. But accepting this from Christopher felt like crossing a line I didn't fully understand yet. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Did you receive the package? His voice, smooth and unhurried, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I did, and I can't accept it. Why not? Because it's wildly expensive and I barely know you. You know I found you unconscious in a storm and made sure you survived. That's not nothing. I paced my small living room, phone pressed to my ear. That's exactly my point. You already did too much. I don't need charity from strangers. It's not charity, Hannah. It's practical. You have a dangerous condition and inadequate equipment to manage it. I have the means to solve that problem. Simple mathematics. Nothing about this is simple. Then let me complicate it further. Have dinner with me Saturday. The subject change caught me off guard. What? Dinner. Saturday night. I'll pick you up at 7. I didn't agree to that. You didn't refuse either. I could hear the amusement in his voice. Considerate payment for the monitor. 1 meal in exchange for potentially saving your life again. Seems like a fair trade. That's not how this works. Then explain to me how it works. I stopped pacing. Through my window, I could see the street where I'd collapsed. 3 blocks away. But I'd walked past that spot twice since then. Each time feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I don't know you, I said finally. I don't know anything about you, except you have money and resources and a doctor who makes house calls. For all I know, you're dangerous. I am dangerous. He said it without hesitation. But not to you. How can you possibly know that? Because if I wanted to hurt you, I had ample opportunity that night. Instead, I made sure you were safe and drove you home. That should tell you everything you need to know. It should have. But something in his tone suggested layers I wasn't seeing yet. 1 dinner, I heard myself say. And then I'm returning the monitor. Keep it for a week first. See how it changes your life. Then decide. He hung up before I could argue. Saturday arrived faster than I wanted it to. I spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing what to wear, finally settling on a dark green dress that Sarah had convinced me to buy last year for a conference I'd never attended. It made my red hair look less orange, and my pale skin less ghostly. That was about all I could ask for. Christopher arrived exactly at 7, driving himself this time in a black Audi that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. He opened my car door, helped me in with casual courtesy that suggested expensive private school education. You look beautiful, he said, and somehow managed to make it sound like observation rather than flattery. You look like you own half of Boston. Only a quarter. I'm working on the rest. I couldn't tell if he was joking. That should have worried me more than it did. The restaurant was tucked into the North End, the kind of place with no sign and a waiting list measured in months. The owner greeted Christopher by name, embraced him like family, and led us to a private table in the back without asking if we had reservations. You come here often, I observed as we sat. My family has history with this place. Roberto's grandfather taught my grandmother to make proper carbonara. These things matter in our world. Our world. The phrase hung in the air, suggesting boundaries I was only beginning to perceive. The meal was extraordinary. Course after course of food I couldn't pronounce, but tasted like someone had captured Italy and served it on plates. Christopher ordered in rapid Italian, consulting with Roberto about wine pairings and seasonal ingredients. I watched him transform from the controlled man in the car to someone animated and passionate about food and tradition. "Tell me about the animals," he said after Roberto left us with the second course. "Why veterinary medicine? You really want to know?" I wouldn't have asked otherwise, so I told him. About growing up with a father who brought home every stray animal in the neighborhood, about spending summers at my aunt's ranch in Arizona, learning to birth foals and bottle feed lambs, about the scholarship to veterinary school that felt like winning the lottery, about choosing emergency medicine because I like the intensity, the impossible cases, the satisfaction of snatching life back from death's edge. He listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he was actually processing what I said, rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. "You save lives that most people don't value enough," he said finally. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character, which is that you see worth where others see convenience. That's rare. Coming from someone else, it might have sounded pretentious. From him, it landed like truth. What about you?" I asked, seizing the opening. "What do you do when you're not rescuing diabetics from storms?" His expression shifted, subtle but noticeable. "My family has business interests. Import-export primarily. Logistics and distribution through the port." That's vague. It's accurate. It's also the kind of thing people say when they don't want to explain what they actually do. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something else there now. Calculation, maybe. Or caution. "You're perceptive. That's going to complicate things." "What things?" "This. Us. Whatever this is becoming." My heart did something uncomfortable in my chest. Us. As if there was an us after one bizarre rescue and one dinner. "We barely know each other," I said. "That's not entirely true. I know you work doubles that destroy your health. I know you put animals before your own safety. I know you're stubborn about accepting help, but smart enough to recognize when you need it. I know your mother lives in Arizona, and you call her every Sunday. I know you're diabetic, but hate talking about it. I know you're afraid of what I might be, but curious enough to have dinner with me anyway." I stared at him. "How do you know about my mother?" "You talk in your sleep. Dr. Carson mentioned it." "That's creepy. That's thorough. There's a difference." "Is there?" He leaned back, studying me with those dark eyes that seemed to see through layers I didn't know I had. "I'm going to be honest with you, Hannah. More honest than is probably wise. My life is complicated in ways you don't understand yet. The work I do, the family I come from, the obligations I carry. They don't mix well with normal. If you walk away now, I'll understand. But if you stay, if you choose to keep seeing me, you need to know that nothing about this will be simple. You're trying to scare me off. I'm trying to be fair." "Why? You could have just had dinner and left it at that." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Because I like you, and because people I like have a tendency to get hurt by proximity to my world. I'd prefer to avoid that outcome this time." There was pain in that admission. Old pain, carried like a weight he'd grown used to but never stopped feeling. I should have thanked him for dinner and called an Uber home. Should have recognized this for what it was. A man warning me away from danger I couldn't yet see. But sitting across from Christopher Ravellini, watching the candlelight cast shadows across his face, all I felt was the pull of something I couldn't name. "I'll make you a deal," I said. "You stop being so mysterious, and actually tell me what you do, and I'll decide if I want to walk away." He considered this for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and showed me the screen. It was a news article. "Christopher Ravellini acquitted in federal racketeering case." The date was 2 years ago. The photo showed him leaving a courthouse in an expensive suit, surrounded by lawyers and grim-faced men who looked exactly like the kind of people mothers warned their daughters about. My blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. "Your mob," I said quietly. "My family has been in Boston for 4 generations. We manage certain business interests that operate outside traditional regulatory frameworks. That's a really polite way of saying organized crime. It's an accurate way of describing a complex reality." I should have stood up. Should have left immediately. Instead, I kept staring at the article, at his face in that photo. He looked different there. Harder. More dangerous. The same man, but without whatever softness he'd shown me. "Why tell me this?" I asked. "Because you asked. And because I meant what I said about being fair." He put his phone away. "If you want to leave, I'll drive you home. No judgment. No consequences. You'll never hear from me again. And if I stay, then you accept that my world is dangerous. That the people I do business with are not the kind you invite to dinner parties. That loving me, if it ever comes to that, means understanding I can't always tell you where I've been or what I've done. Loving me." He said it like it was inevitable, like he could see that future already written. "This is insane," I whispered. "Yes, I should run. Probably. Why aren't I?" He reached across the table, took my hand. His skin was warm, his grip gentle but firm. "Because you're braver than you think. And because part of you already knows that what we could have is worth the risk." I looked at our hands. His fingers were long, elegant, with calluses that suggested he'd done physical work at some point, despite the obvious wealth. There were small scars across his knuckles. Evidence of violence, probably. Evidence of everything he'd just warned me about. I should have pulled away. I didn't. "I need time," I said, "to think about this. About what it means. Take all the time you need. But Hannah?" He waited until I met his eyes. "The monitor is yours regardless of what you decide. That part isn't conditional." He drove me home in silence. Walked me to my door like a gentleman. Didn't try to kiss me, though I found myself irrationally disappointed by that. "Thank you for dinner," I said, key in hand. "Thank you for listening. Not many people would have stayed after seeing that article. I'm still not sure I made the right choice. Neither am I. But I'm glad you made it anyway." He left me standing in my doorway, watching his taillights disappear down my street. I went inside, locked the door, and sat on my couch in the dark for a long time. The new glucose monitor buzzed on my wrist. Levels stable. Everything normal. Except nothing was normal anymore. And despite every logical reason to run, all I could think about was when I'd see him again. I spent 3 days researching Christopher Ravellini online. 3 days falling down rabbit holes of news articles, court documents, and conspiracy theories that made my head spin. The more I learned, the less I understood why I wasn't running in the opposite direction. His family had been in Boston for 4 generations, just like he'd said. What he hadn't mentioned was that those 4 generations had built an empire on everything from legitimate shipping to decidedly less legitimate activities that the FBI had been trying to prosecute for decades. The Ravellini name appeared in dozens of investigations. It was never quite proven, never quite disproven. Christopher himself was something of an enigma in the articles I found. He'd taken over as head of the family 5 years ago after his father died of a heart attack. Under his leadership, the family had somehow become both more powerful and more untouchable. The federal case against him 2 years ago had fallen apart spectacularly when key witnesses recanted and evidence mysteriously disappeared. I should have deleted his number, should have thrown away the glucose monitor and pretended that night in the storm had never happened. Instead, I called him on Wednesday evening, standing in my apartment with my heart in my throat. He answered on the second ring. "Hannah." Just my name, but the way he said it made my stomach flip. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what you told me, about your world. And I have questions. A lot of them. Ask. Not on the phone. In person." There was a pause. When he spoke again, I could hear the smile in his voice. "I can be at your place in 20 minutes. "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. "Somewhere public. Somewhere normal. The coffee shop on Hanover Street. The one that stays open late. I'll see you there in 30 minutes. He hung up before I could argue about the location. I Googled the place. It was in the North End, what the articles had referred to as traditional Ravellini territory. Of course it was. I arrived first, ordered a cappuccino I didn't want, and claimed a table near the window where I could watch the street. The neighborhood was beautiful in that old Boston way. Brick buildings and narrow streets that had probably looked the same for 100 years. People walked past speaking Italian, stopping to greet each other with the easy familiarity of a true community. Christopher appeared exactly 30 minutes after he'd hung up. He moved through the coffee shop like he owned it, which he probably did, and every person there seemed to know him. The older woman behind the counter called out a greeting. A man reading a newspaper nodded respectfully. A young couple at another table looked up with poorly concealed nervousness. He sat across from me, declining coffee when the woman brought it anyway. "You wanted to talk," he said. "I'm listening. The articles I read, the court cases, the allegations, are they true? Some of them. Which ones? Does it matter? You've already decided I'm dangerous. The question is whether you can live with that." I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, needing something to hold on to. I need to understand what I'm getting into. If I'm getting into anything. You can't just drop a bomb like, "I'm in the mob," and expect me to be okay with vague answers. "You're right." He leaned back, studying me with those dark eyes. "What do you want to know specifically? Have you killed people?" The question hung between us like smoke. Around us, the coffee shop continued its normal evening rhythm. Someone laughed at another table. The espresso machine hissed. "Yes," he said simply. My heart dropped into my stomach. Hearing him admit it out loud was different from suspecting it. "How many?" "Fewer than you're imagining. More than I'm proud of." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you. The details would keep you awake at night. Trust me when I say ignorance is a gift in my world." I wanted to argue, wanted to demand specifics, but looking at his face, at the careful blankness there, I realized he was protecting me from knowledge that would fundamentally change how I saw him. "Why do it then?" I asked instead. "Why stay in that life if it requires things you're not proud of?" "Because it's not just my life. It's my family's legacy, my responsibility. The people who work for us, who depend on us, they don't have other options. I can't just walk away because it's morally complicated." That sounds like rationalization. It is, but it's also true. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I was born into this world, Hannah. I didn't choose it any more than you chose to be diabetic. But I can either do it well and protect the people who rely on me, or do it poorly and watch them suffer. Those are my options." I thought about that, about the clinic, about the impossible cases I took because someone had to, about doing difficult things because they needed doing. "I'm not saying I understand," I said carefully, "or that I approve, but I can see why you stay. That's more than most people would give me." We sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, I watched an old man walk past with a small dog on a leash. Normal life, happening all around us while we discussed murder and morality. "If I keep seeing you," I said finally, "if this becomes something real, what does that mean for me? Am I in danger? From my enemies? Potentially? From me? Never." He said it with absolute certainty. "But I won't lie to you, Hannah. Being close to me puts a target on your back. That's why most people in my position don't get involved with civilians." "Then why pursue me?" His expression softened. "Just slightly. Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me and seen something other than the family name. Because you saved a dog's life while your own blood sugar was crashing and didn't think twice about it. Because when I carried you into my house that night, soaking wet and barely conscious, you made a joke about haunting me." He paused. "Because I want you in my life, and I'm selfish enough to try to make that happen even knowing the risks." My throat felt tight. This was crazy. All of this was completely insane. Getting involved with Christopher Ravellini would complicate every aspect of my life in ways I couldn't begin to predict. "I want to try," I heard myself say, "but I need boundaries. I need to know there are parts of my life that stay mine. My work, my friends, my independence. I can't become someone who's just an accessory to your world. I wouldn't want you to." He reached across the table, took my hand. "I like you exactly as you are. That doesn't work if you have to change everything to fit into my life. And if it gets too much, if I realize I can't handle it, then you walk away. No consequences, no threats. You'll always be safe, Hannah. Whether you're with me or not." I wanted to believe him. Looking into his eyes, I thought maybe I could. "Okay," I said. "Let's try this. But slowly. And honestly. No more secrets dropped like bombs. I can work with that." He smiled, and this time it did reach his eyes. We finished our coffee talking about easier things. He asked about work, about the animals I'd treated this week. I told him about Murphy, the golden retriever, who was recovering beautifully, about Sarah Foster, who'd taken one look at me on Monday and known immediately that something had changed. When we left the coffee shop, Christopher walked me to my car 3 blocks away. The evening was cold but clear, the kind of November night that promised winter was coming soon. "Sunday dinner," he said as I unlocked my door. "My grandmother hosts every week. She wants to meet you." "Your grandmother knows about me?" "Nonna knows everything. It's her superpower." He looked almost nervous for the first time since I'd met him. "You don't have to say yes, but it would mean something to me if you came." Meeting his family. That felt significant. Like crossing another threshold I wouldn't be able to uncross. "What time?" I asked. "I'll pick you up at 2. He kissed me then. For the first time since that night at my door. It was gentle, questioning, giving me space to pull away if I wanted. I didn't want to. I leaned into it instead, into him, and let myself feel the warmth of his hands on my waist, the solidness of him against me. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing harder. "Sunday," I said. "Sunday," he agreed. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling, my heart doing acrobatics in my chest. This was happening. I was really doing this. Getting involved with a man whose last name appeared in FBI files, and whose world operated by rules I didn't understand. Sarah was going to kill me. Sunday arrived too fast. I spent Saturday night trying on and rejecting every outfit I owned before finally calling my mother in Arizona in a panic. "What do you wear to meet your maybe boyfriend's Italian grandmother?" I asked without preamble. "Hannah Marie Mitchell, are you dating someone?" Mom's voice went up an octave. "Tell me everything immediately." So I did. Most of it, anyway. I left out the parts about organized crime and federal investigations, focusing instead on how we'd met, on his kindness that night in the storm, on the way he listened when I talked about work. "He sounds wonderful, honey. And Italian grandmothers love everybody. Just be yourself and bring something for the table. Flowers or wine. What if she hates me? Then she has terrible taste. You're delightful. Mom, I'm your mother. I'm legally required to think you're delightful. But I also happen to be right." She paused. "Hannah, are you sure about this? You sound nervous." More than just meeting the family nervous. I considered telling her the truth. Considered explaining about Christopher's world, about the complications and the dangers. But she was 2,000 miles away in Arizona, living her quiet retirement life. She didn't need to worry about things she couldn't control. "Just nervous," I lied. "He's important. I want his family to like me. Then they will. Because you're you. And you're wonderful. Call me after and tell me how it goes." I promised I would, and hung up feeling marginally better. At least about the clothes situation. I settled on dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that Sarah had once told me made me look approachable. Approachable felt important for meeting an Italian grandmother. Christopher arrived at 2 on the dot, driving a different car than usual. This one was older, more subtle. He explained that Nonna didn't approve of flashy displays of wealth. "She grew up during the Depression," he said as we drove toward the North End. "She thinks anything fancier than a Ford is showing off. But you drive an Audi. That's why I borrowed Vincent's Honda for today." The house was a 3-story brick building on a narrow street, indistinguishable from its neighbors, except for the immaculate condition of the front steps and the lace curtains in every window. Before we even reached the door, it flew open, and a tiny woman in her 80s appeared, already talking in rapid Italian. Christopher responded in the same language, his accent flawless. The woman grabbed his face and kissed both his cheeks, before turning to me with sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. "So this is the girl who has my Christopher smiling again," she said in heavily accented English. "Come, come. Let me look at you." She took my hands, studying me with the kind of thorough examination usually reserved for medical procedures. Then she pulled me into a hug that smelled like garlic and flour and something sweet I couldn't identify. "You're too skinny," she declared. "We fixed that today. Come inside. Everyone is waiting." Everyone turned out to be about 20 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, children running underfoot. The house was loud and warm and chaotic in ways that made my quiet childhood with just me and Mom feel impossibly distant. Christopher stayed close, his hand at the small of my back, introducing me to person after person whose names I immediately forgot. They all spoke a mixture of English and Italian, switching mid-sentence without seeming to notice. Dinner was served family-style at a table that had been extended to fit everyone. Pasta, meatballs, chicken, vegetables, bread, wine flowing freely. I was seated next to Nonna, who kept putting food on my plate while asking questions about my work. "You save animals," she said, nodding approvingly. "This is good. Christopher, he saves nothing. Only takes." "Nonna," Christopher protested from across the table, but he was smiling. "It's true. You break things, you build things, but you don't save things." She patted my hand. "You are good influence. Maybe you teach him." The meal stretched for hours. After we ate, after the dishes were cleared, people lingered over coffee and pastries. Children played in the living room while adults talked and laughed. Christopher disappeared into another room with some of his uncles, leaving me with Nonna and a collection of aunts who wanted to know everything about my family, my education, my plans. I answered as honestly as I could while being vague about the parts that mattered. Yes, my mother lived in Arizona. No, I didn't have siblings. Yes, I'd always wanted to be a veterinarian. No, I hadn't thought much about marriage or children yet. That last answer earned me a collective sigh from the aunts. "She's young," Nonna said firmly. "And Christopher needs time to prove he's worth keeping. Let them be." When Christopher finally reappeared, there was tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Whatever he'd discussed with his uncles had not been entirely pleasant. He caught my eye and gave a small nod toward the door. I stood, making my goodbyes. Nonna hugged me again, this time whispering in my ear, "He's a good boy, my Christopher. Hard life, hard choices, but good heart. You'll see." In the car, Christopher was quiet. I waited until we were several blocks away before asking, "What happened in there?" "Family business. Nothing you need to worry about. That's exactly the kind of thing you promised not to say." He glanced at me, then back at the road. "There's a situation developing, with an organization trying to move into territory we control. It's being handled." "Handled how?" "Carefully, strategically, in ways that hopefully avoid violence." He paused. "But that's not guaranteed." Fear curled in my stomach. Not for myself, but for him. "Is it dangerous?" "Everything about my life is dangerous, Hannah. That's the reality you signed up for." We drove in silence back to my apartment. At my door, Christopher pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. "Nonna loved you," he said quietly. "She told me I'd be an idiot to let you go. She's a wise woman." "She is." He pulled back to look at me. "The situation I mentioned. It might mean I'm less available for a while. Fewer dinners, fewer calls. I need you to understand it's not about you." "How long?" "Could be days. Could be weeks. Depends on how things develop." I cupped his face, feeling the stubble there, the warmth of his skin. "Be careful. Whatever you're doing, whoever you're dealing with, please be careful." "I will, I promise." He kissed me goodbye, deeper this time, with an urgency that suggested he was already preparing to leave. When he drove away, I stood in my doorway watching his taillights disappear, fear and longing tangled together in my chest. Sarah was right. I was in too deep already. And the worst part was knowing I didn't want to climb back out. Christopher's warning about being less available turned out to be an understatement. 2 days became 4, then a week. He texted sporadically, brief messages that told me nothing. "Working late. Things are complicated. Thinking of you." Each one felt like a breadcrumb leading nowhere. I threw myself into work because the alternative was sitting at home imagining worst-case scenarios. Murphy the golden retriever went home with his owner, fully recovered. A Persian cat came in with kidney failure that we managed to stabilize. A parrot with a respiratory infection. A rabbit with a broken leg. Each case was a distraction from the growing knot of anxiety in my chest. Sarah noticed, of course. She had a talent for reading my moods even when I tried to hide them. "He hasn't called," she said on Thursday afternoon, not even bothering to phrase it as a question. "He's busy. Family business. Hannah." She used her serious voice, the one that made junior vets straighten up. "I know you're falling for this man, but you need to protect yourself. Men who disappear without explanation don't suddenly become reliable. It's complicated. It's always complicated. That's what every woman says before she gets her heart broken." I wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that Christopher's world operated by different rules, that his silence wasn't about me but about protecting me. But how could I explain that without revealing exactly what kind of man I was involved with? "I can handle myself," I said instead. Sarah looked at me with something that might have been pity. "I know you can. I just don't want you to have to." That evening, I was locking up the clinic when a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Not Christopher's car. This one was bigger, more aggressive. 2 men got out, both wearing suits that fit too well to be off the rack. My heart started hammering before my brain could fully process why I was afraid. The taller one approached with his hands visible, non-threatening. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm Bruno. I work with Christopher." Bruno. The name from Sunday dinner. One of Christopher's men. "What's wrong? Is he hurt?" "He's fine, but we have a situation, and he wanted me to bring you somewhere safe." "I'd safe from what?" Bruno glanced around the empty parking lot, his expression grim. "There are people who know about you. People Christopher has problems with. He doesn't want to take chances with your safety." Ice slid down my spine. This was what Christopher had warned me about. The danger of being close to him. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me exactly what's happening. The Yamaguchi organization has been moving product through Boston without permission. Christopher's been negotiating with them to back off. Negotiations haven't gone well." Bruno shifted his weight. "They've been watching his movements, which means they've been watching you. Why would they care about me? Because they've seen him with you. And people in our world use leverage however they can find it." My stomach dropped. I wasn't just Christopher's girlfriend anymore. I was a potential weakness. A target. So what? I'm supposed to hide until this is resolved? That could be weeks. Christopher has an apartment, secure building, armed guards, everything you need. It's temporary. Just until we handle the situation. Handle it how? Bruno's expression darkened. "You don't want to know those details, Dr. Mitchell." He was right. I didn't. But I also hated the idea of hiding, of letting fear dictate my life. I have patients, animals that depend on me. Dr. Foster said she'll cover your shifts. Christopher already arranged it. Of course he did. Without asking me. Without giving me a choice in how my own life was managed. And if I refuse, then I stay here and make sure nobody gets to you. Either way, you're protected. But Christopher would prefer you somewhere more secure. I looked at the clinic, at my car in the lot, at the normal life I'd built that suddenly felt impossibly fragile. "Can I at least pack a bag? I'll follow you home. We'll get whatever you need, then move you to the apartment." The drive to my place felt surreal. Bruno's SUV behind me the whole way, a constant reminder that this was really happening, that Christopher's world had caught up to mine in ways I'd been too naive to fully anticipate. At my apartment, I packed quickly. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the glucose monitor that Christopher had given me. Bruno waited in the hallway, professional and distant, giving me space while making it clear he wasn't leaving. My phone buzzed. "Christopher, finally. Bruno told you?" "He did. This is insane, Christopher." "I know. I'm sorry. This isn't what I wanted." His voice was tight with stress I'd never heard before. "But I can't risk anything happening to you. Not because of my problems. Where are you? Dealing with it. Making sure the Yamaguchi understand that crossing my family has consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Silence on the other end. Long enough that I knew the answer would be one I didn't want to hear. The kind that end threats permanently. "You're going to kill people. I'm going to protect what's mine. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." He said it with absolute certainty. "One is murder. The other is survival. In my world, you don't get the luxury of choosing neither." I sat on my bed, surrounded by half-packed bags, feeling the weight of every decision that had led me here. I should have walked away that night at the coffee shop, but you didn't. And now we're both in too deep to pretend otherwise. He paused. Bruno will take care of you. The apartment is safe. I'll come to you as soon as I can. When? I don't know. Days, maybe. However long it takes to end this. And if something happens to you, it won't. You can't promise that. Watch me. His voice softened. I've survived worse than the Yamaguchi, Hannah. I'm not going anywhere. Not when I finally have something worth coming home to. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, at his name on the screen, and tried to swallow past the lump in my throat. Bruno appeared in my doorway. Ready? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The apartment was in a high-rise downtown, the kind of building with a doorman and keycard access and cameras everywhere. Bruno walked me through security, introduced me to the guards on duty, and took me up to the 20th floor. The space was bigger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Modern furniture that looked expensive and barely used. A kitchen stocked with food I hadn't bought. Everything impersonal and sterile and wrong. Christopher stays here sometimes, Bruno explained. When he works late, you'll be safe here. Guards downstairs 24/7. Nobody gets in without authorization. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected. There's a difference. I was getting really tired of people telling me about differences that felt non-existent. Bruno showed me how to work the security system, gave me emergency numbers, and left me alone with instructions to keep the door locked and not go out alone. The silence after he left was deafening. I unpacked mechanically, putting my clothes in drawers that smelled like cedar and Christopher. The glucose monitor on my wrist buzzed a low alert. I'd forgotten to eat lunch. Classic. The kitchen had orange juice in the fridge. I drank it straight from the carton, too exhausted to care about manners, and sank onto the couch. This was my life now. Hiding in a luxury apartment while the man I was falling for dealt with threats using methods I didn't want to understand. This was what choosing Christopher meant. Fear and danger, and a world that operated by rules written in blood. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. I know where you are. I know why. Call me when you're ready to talk. I should have called her immediately. Should have used her as the lifeline she was offering. Instead, I curled up on Christopher's couch, pulled a blanket around myself, and stared at the city lights through those massive windows. Somewhere out there, Christopher was handling things. Somewhere out there, people might be dying because I existed. Because loving me made him vulnerable in ways his enemies could exploit. The weight of that was almost unbearable. 3 days passed in the apartment. 3 days of Christopher texting sporadically. Of Bruno checking in twice daily. Of me pacing like a caged animal. Sarah covered my shifts without complaint. My glucose levels were surprisingly stable, probably because I had nothing to do but eat regular meals and monitor myself obsessively. On the 4th night, Christopher finally came. I heard the key in the lock after midnight, heard footsteps in the entryway. When he appeared in the doorway to the living room, I was already standing, heart pounding. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, stubble heavier than usual, tension in every line of his body, but he was whole. Alive. Hannah. I crossed the space between us in 3 strides and slammed into him, arms wrapping around his neck, face buried in his shoulder. He caught me, held me tight, and I felt some of the tension drain out of both of us. It's over, he said into my hair. The Yamaguchi are gone. You're safe. What did you do? What I had to. What I always do. He pulled back to look at me, cupping my face in his hands. But you don't need those details. You just need to know it's finished. People died. Yes. Because of me. No. His grip tightened. Because they tried to use you against me. Because they made a choice that had consequences. This is not your fault, Hannah. It's mine for bringing you into my world in the first place. Tears burned behind my eyes. I'd spent 3 days trying to convince myself I could handle this, that being with Christopher was worth the cost. But now, faced with the reality of what that cost looked like, I wasn't sure anymore. I'm scared, I whispered. All the time now. Scared something will happen to you. Scared someone will come after me. Scared of what it means that I'm still here despite everything. Christopher pulled me close again, resting his chin on top of my head. Fear means you understand the risks, That's good. That keeps you careful." He paused. "But I need you to trust me when I say I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. Always. No matter what it costs. That's what scares me most. What it might cost you. Then we're even. Because the thought of something happening to you nearly destroyed me these past few days." We stood there in the middle of his apartment, holding each other like lifelines. And I felt something fundamental shift. This was real now. Not just attraction or curiosity, or the thrill of something dangerous. This was love, messy and complicated and terrifying in its intensity. "Take me home," I said finally. "To your real home, not this place." He studied my face, looking for something. "You sure?" "No, but I'm choosing you anyway." A smile touched his lips, tired but genuine. "Then let's go home." 6 months dissolved into the kind of domestic routine I never imagined having with someone like Christopher. His house became our house. My clothes migrated from the guest closet to his bedroom. My shampoo appeared in his shower. The coffee maker learned to brew exactly how I liked it in the morning. We fell into patterns. I worked my shifts at the clinic while he handled whatever business his family required. Some nights he came home smelling like expensive restaurants and cigar smoke from meetings. Other nights he appeared exhausted, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of things he wouldn't discuss. I learned not to ask about those nights. Learned to just hold him, and let silence say what words couldn't. The house itself slowly transformed. Where everything had been stark and masculine before, little touches of me started appearing. Books about veterinary medicine on the coffee table. Photos of animals I'd treated taped to the refrigerator. A ridiculous ceramic frog that Sarah had given me as a joke, sitting on the kitchen counter because it made Christopher smile every time he saw it. Sundays remained sacred. We never missed dinner at Nana's, and gradually I stopped feeling like an outsider in that loud, warm chaos of family. The aunts stopped interrogating me about marriage plans. The cousins included me in their jokes. Even the children treated me like I belonged, dragging me to play games or show me their latest treasures. But there were tensions simmering beneath the surface that neither of us wanted to name. It started small. Christopher taking phone calls in other rooms, coming home late with vague explanations. The way Bruno would appear sometimes with messages delivered in Italian, glancing at me like he wasn't sure I should be hearing even that much. I tried to give him space. Tried to respect that his world had boundaries mine couldn't cross. But the not knowing ate at me in ways I hadn't anticipated. One evening in late spring, I finally broke. We were having dinner at home, just the two of us. Christopher had made pasta, a recipe Nonna had taught him, and we'd opened a bottle of wine from his family's vineyard in Italy. Everything should have been perfect. Instead, I watched him push food around his plate, mind clearly somewhere else. And something snapped. "Talk to me." He looked up, startled. "What?" "You've been somewhere else for weeks. Distracted, tense. Whatever's happening, I want to know about it. It's just business. Nothing you need to worry about." "That's exactly what I mean." I set down my fork harder than necessary. "You keep saying things like that. Keep treating me like I'm fragile, like I can't handle knowing what's really going on in your life. I'm protecting you. From what? Information? Reality? I'm already in this, Christopher. I moved into your house. I go to your family dinners. People know I'm with you. So stop pretending you can keep me separate from your world when I'm already living in it." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you're asking for. Then explain it to me. Stop shutting me out and actually let me in." He stood abruptly, walked to the window overlooking the garden. I watched the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and released at his sides. "There's a situation developing," he said finally, not turning around. "A business deal that's more complicated than it should be. One of our partners is making moves that suggest he might be working with competitors. If that's true, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The permanent kind." He turned to face me. "And if I'm wrong, if I move against him without being certain, it could fracture alliances we've spent decades building. Either way, people might die because of decisions I make in the next few weeks." The weight of that settled over the room like smoke. "That's what's been keeping you up at night." That's part of it. The other part is knowing that if something goes wrong, if I miscalculate, you become a target again. And last time we dealt with threats against you, I barely slept for days imagining all the ways I could lose you. I crossed the room to him, took his face in my hands. I'm not asking you to protect me from everything. I'm asking you to trust me enough to be your partner, not just the person you come home to, but someone who actually understands what you're carrying. You want to be my partner? Isn't that what we're building here? A life together? That doesn't work if you keep half of your existence locked away from me. He searched my face, looking for something. Fear, maybe, or doubt. I tried to show him neither. If I do this, if I let you fully into my world, you can't unknow what you learn. You can't decide later that it's too much and walk away clean. You'll be complicit in ways that change you fundamentally. I'm already complicit. I chose you, knowing what you are. Now I'm choosing to understand it completely. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, like he was sealing something between us. When we pulled apart, both breathing harder, he took my hand and led me to his study. The room was lined with bookshelves and filing cabinets, a massive desk dominating the center. Christopher unlocked one of the cabinets and pulled out a folder thick with documents. This is the partner I mentioned, Anthony Brunarelli. He's been with my family for 15 years, handles most of our legitimate import business. He spread papers across the desk. 3 months ago, shipments started going missing. Small amounts at first, easy to write off as warehouse errors, but the patterns escalated. I studied the documents, invoices, shipping manifests, warehouse reports, numbers that meant nothing to me, but clearly told a story to Christopher. You think he's stealing from you? I think he's diverting product to sell independently, which means he's working with someone who can move that volume. Probably one of the families trying to establish a foothold in our territory. Have you talked to him about it? Not yet. I need proof first. Accusations without evidence just give him time to cover his tracks or run. So what are you going to do? Christopher's expression went cold in a way I'd never seen directed at anything but distant threats. I'm going to watch him until he makes a mistake. And when he does, when I have undeniable proof, I'm going to make an example that ensures nobody else in my organization considers betrayal. You're going to kill him. If the evidence confirms what I suspect, yes, but cleanly, quickly, not with cruelty, just finality. He said it so calmly, like discussing weather. I should have been horrified. Maybe part of me was. But standing there looking at the man I loved explaining the mechanics of necessary violence, I felt something else. Understanding, maybe. Or acceptance that this was who he was and what his world required. Show me the rest, I said. So he did. For the next 3 hours, Christopher walked me through the architecture of his family's operations. The legitimate businesses that provided cover and income. The less legitimate ones that generated the real power. The network of alliances and rivalries that governed Boston's underworld. The rules, unwritten but absolute, that kept violence contained and business flowing. By the end of it, I wasn't braver, just better briefed. If you need me to leave the clinic again, you tell me first, I said. He nodded once. No surprises. Not for you. It wasn't romance. It was policy. And for the first time, it felt like we had one. He explained how disputes were mediated, how territories were negotiated, how betrayals were handled. He didn't soften any of it, didn't try to make it palatable, just showed me the reality of the world he navigated every day. When he finished, I sat back in the leather chair, mind reeling from the complexity of it all. This is what you manage, all of this, with help from people I trust. But ultimately, yes, the decisions are mine. The responsibility is mine. He poured us both whiskey from the bottle he kept in his desk. Now you understand why I try to keep you separate. It's heavy, Hannah. And once you're carrying this knowledge, you can't put it down. I took the whiskey, sipped it, felt the burn. I'd rather carry it with you than watch you carry it alone. He came around the desk, pulled me to my feet, and just held me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We didn't need to. Something had shifted between us. A barrier removed. We were partners now. In every sense that mattered. The investigation into Brunarelli took another 2 weeks. Christopher showed me the evidence as it accumulated. Security footage of him meeting with known associates of rival families, bank records showing unexplained deposits, shipping manifests that didn't match actual inventory. By the end, even I could see the betrayal was undeniable. When? I asked one night as we reviewed the final pieces of evidence. Tomorrow. I've called a meeting with the senior members of the family. Brunarelli will be there. I'll confront him with everything we have. And if he confesses? Then it ends quickly. And if he doesn't? Then it ends anyway, just with more witnesses to the evidence. I took his hand, threaded my fingers through his. I want to come. He stared at me. Absolutely not. You said I was your partner. Partners don't hide from difficult moments. Hannah, this isn't a board meeting. This is an execution. I know what it is. And I know if I stay home tomorrow while you do this, it creates exactly the kind of separation we just agreed to eliminate. I don't have to be in the room, but I want to be there, at the warehouse or wherever it happens. Close enough that you know I'm choosing to stand with you through all of it. He started to argue. I watched him form the words, the protests, the logical reasons why I should stay far away. Then I watched him realize none of them mattered if we were serious about being true partners. You stay in my office, he said finally. You don't see what happens. You just wait until it's done. Okay. And if I tell you to leave, you leave immediately. No questions. Agreed. He pulled me close, rested his forehead against mine. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. The next evening, I rode with Christopher to one of the family's warehouses near the port. The building was massive, shadowy in the fading light. Inside, it smelled like shipping crates and motor oil, and something else I couldn't identify. Christopher's office was on the second floor, overlooking the main warehouse floor through large windows. He settled me there with a kiss that tasted like goodbye, and walked down to where several men were already gathered. I watched through the glass as Brunarelli arrived. He looked nervous, but trying to hide it. The other men, including Bruno and Vincent, stood with crossed arms and hard expressions. Christopher started speaking. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Brunarelli's reaction. Denial at first, then desperation as Christopher presented document after document. Finally, something that looked like resignation. The conversation lasted maybe 15 minutes. At the end, Brunarelli nodded once. Christopher said something to Bruno, who led Brunarelli toward a door at the far end of the warehouse. I turned away from the window then. I'd wanted to be here, to show Christopher I could handle his world, but I didn't need to watch the moment of violence itself. That felt like a line I could draw while still honoring my commitment. 10 minutes later, Christopher returned to the office. His hands were clean, his clothes unstained, but something in his eyes was heavy. It's done. I went to him, wrapped my arms around him, and just held on. Let's go home, I said into his chest. We drove back in silence. At the house, I made him tea while he stood at the kitchen sink, washing his hands even though they were already clean. Washing away something invisible that only he could see. Later, in bed, he held me close and whispered into the darkness. Thank you for being there, for not running. Where would I run to? I turned to face him. You're my home now, all of you. Even the parts that scare me. I love you, Hannah Mitchell. More than I thought I could love anyone. My throat tightened with emotion. He'd said it. Finally said the words we'd been dancing around for months. I love you too. All of you. The good, the complicated, and everything in between. We made love slowly that night, reverent and tender. Afterward, tangled together in the sheets, I felt the weight of what we'd become to each other. Partners in every sense. Bound together by choices that couldn't be unmade. Christopher fell asleep first, his breathing evening out. I lay awake a while longer, watching the moonlight paint patterns across the ceiling, and thought about the phone call I needed to make tomorrow. My mother in Arizona, telling her I'd found someone serious, someone I wanted her to meet, leaving out all the details that would keep her awake at night worrying, letting her just be happy that her daughter was finally in love, because I was. Desperately, completely, irrevocably in love with Christopher Ravellini. And nothing about that was simple, but it was real. And it was mine. and that mattered more than anything else. Life settled into something I'd never imagined possible. Christopher's house became our house in every meaningful way. My veterinary textbooks shared shelf space with his business ledgers. My ridiculous collection of coffee mugs crowded his minimalist kitchen. Even the garden behind the house showed evidence of my influence, with herbs I'd planted for cooking and flowers I'd chosen for no reason, except they made me happy. We hosted Sunday dinners at Nana's faithfully. The questions about when we were getting married had shifted from subtle hints to outright interrogations from the aunts. Christopher would just smile and change the subject while squeezing my hand under the table. But underneath the domestic bliss, pregnancy was changing everything in ways I hadn't anticipated. I discovered I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in late summer. I'd been feeling off for weeks, exhausted beyond what my shifts at the clinic could explain. My glucose levels fluctuating unpredictably despite careful monitoring. Sarah had noticed me running to the bathroom during consultations and practically forced me to take a test. 2 lines, clear and undeniable. I sat on the closed toilet lid in the clinic bathroom, staring at the plastic stick in my trembling hands. A baby, Christopher's baby, growing inside me right now while I tried to process what this meant for our complicated life. Terror and joy warred in my chest. I wanted this, I realized with shocking clarity. Wanted Christopher's child, wanted to build a family with him. But the timing felt impossible. We weren't even engaged yet, and bringing a child into his world, into the danger and violence that sometimes knocked on our door, felt profoundly selfish. Sarah found me still sitting there 20 minutes later. "Hannah, you okay?" I held up the test wordlessly. She took one look and pulled me into a hug. "Does Christopher know?" "Not yet. I just found out myself." "Are you going to tell him?" "I don't know. I mean, obviously eventually. But maybe I should wait until I've processed this myself first." Sarah pulled back, studying my face. "Or maybe you're scared of his reaction." She wasn't wrong. Christopher had never mentioned wanting children. We'd never discussed it beyond vague someday hypotheticals. What if this wasn't what he wanted? What if the reality of fatherhood in his dangerous world made him pull away? I hid the pregnancy for 3 days. 3 days of pretending everything was normal while secretly researching high-risk pregnancy management for diabetics. 3 days of Christopher asking if I was feeling all right, and me lying through my teeth. 3 days of carrying this enormous secret while trying to figure out how to share it. Sarah finally cornered me on Friday. "You need to tell him. Today, before you make yourself sick with stress. I'm working up to it. Hannah, he's going to notice eventually. Preferably before you start showing." She was right. Of course she was right. That evening, I came home to find Christopher in the kitchen attempting to make dinner. He'd gotten better at cooking over the past months, though he still approached it with the same intense focus he applied to business negotiations. "Hey." He looked up from chopping vegetables. "How was work?" "Good. Busy." I set my bag down, trying to summon courage I didn't feel. "Can we talk?" The knife stopped moving. Christopher read tension in voices the way other people read books. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly, it's just..." I took a breath. "I'm pregnant." The knife clattered to the cutting board. Christopher stared at me, frozen. His expression completely unreadable. The silence stretched so long I started to panic. "Christopher, say something." He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. "Are you sure?" Took 3 tests. All positive. He pulled back just enough to cut my face, searching my eyes. "How long have you known?" 3 days. 3 days? Something flickered across his face. "Hurt, maybe. Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "Because I was scared. We never talked about this. About having children. And your world is so dangerous, Christopher. What if bringing a baby into it is the most selfish thing I could do?" He kissed me then, fierce and desperate. "This is not selfish. This is the best news I've gotten in my entire life." He rested his forehead against mine. "I love you, Hannah. And I'm going to love our child. We'll figure everything else out together." Relief crashed through me so intensely my knees went weak. He caught me, guided me to a chair, knelt in front of me with his hands on my knees. Tell me what you need. What the doctors said. Everything. So I did. Explained about the risks of diabetic pregnancy, the need for careful monitoring, the possibility of complications. Christopher listened with complete focus, already mentally cataloging challenges and solutions. Dr. Carson, he said when I finished. He'll coordinate everything. The best maternal fetal specialist in Boston. Regular monitoring, whatever you need. I have doctors at the clinic, who are excellent, I'm sure. But for this, you get the absolute best. No arguments. I wanted to protest. Wanted to insist I could manage my own health care. But looking at Christopher's face, at the protective intensity already radiating from him, I recognized this for what it was. His way of controlling what little he could in a situation that terrified him as much as it did me. Okay, I agreed. But I'm still working. At least for a while. Until when? Until my body tells me to stop. I'm not going to bubble wrap myself for 9 months, Christopher. The pregnancy is high risk, but that doesn't mean I'm fragile. He opened his mouth to argue, closed it, tried again. Can we compromise? You keep working, but you cut back on hours. No more double shifts. No emergency surgeries where you're on your feet for 12 hours straight. It was reasonable. More reasonable than I'd expected, honestly. Deal. He pulled me close again, one hand moving to rest gently on my still flat stomach. We're having a baby, he said, voice full of wonder. Holy hell, Hannah, we're having a baby! That night, he called Nonna immediately. I could hear her shriek of joy through the phone from across the room. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with congratulations from every aunt, cousin, and extended family member in his network. They're excited, I said, scrolling through messages. Nonna's first great-grandchild. She's been waiting for this moment since I was born. Christopher pulled me onto the couch, arranging me against his chest. We should get married. My heart stuttered. What? Married. Before the baby comes. I want you to be my wife, Hannah. Want our child to have both our names from the beginning. That's not a proposal. That's a statement. You're right. He shifted, digging in his pocket, and produced a small velvet box that made my breath catch. Hannah Mitchell, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner in everything, the mother of my children? The ring was perfect. A diamond surrounded by emeralds that matched my eyes, just like he'd described months ago during a conversation I hadn't realized he was storing away. When did you get this? 3 months ago. I've been carrying it around waiting for the right moment. He smiled. Turns out there is no right moment. There's just the moment you stop waiting. Tears blurred my vision. Yes, obviously yes. He slipped the ring on my finger, kissed me until we were both breathless, and held me close while I cried happy tears into his shirt. The pregnancy progressed smoothly at first. I cut my clinic hours like I'd promised, though I still went in most days. Sarah covered for me when exhaustion hit unexpectedly. Christopher hovered like an anxious bird, texting throughout the day to make sure I'd eaten, slept, taken my insulin. At 12 weeks, we had our first ultrasound. Christopher held my hand so tight, I lost circulation while we watched the screen. The technician pointed out features I couldn't distinguish, measurements that apparently indicated everything was developing normally. Do you want to know the gender? She asked. Christopher looked at me. I looked at him. We'd discussed this. Yes, we said together. It's a girl. Christopher's grip on my hand tightened even more. I watched his face transform, joy and terror mixing in equal measure. A daughter. We were having a daughter. That night, he started building the nursery. Not hiring contractors. Doing it himself with Bruno's help. Painting the walls a soft lavender. Assembling furniture with meticulous care. I watched from the doorway, one hand on my barely showing belly, and felt love so intense it was almost painful. Nonna mobilized her network of aunts and cousins. Suddenly our house was drowning in baby clothes, blankets, toys. Every Sunday dinner became a referendum on names, on parenting philosophies, on whether the baby would have Christopher's dark hair or my red. Life was perfect, almost too perfect. Then, in my 6th month, everything changed. I was at the clinic when Christopher called, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Come home, now. What's wrong?" "Just come home. Bruno's already on his way to get you." Bruno arrived 10 minutes later, his expression grim. He didn't explain during the drive, just drove with focused intensity that made my stomach clench with anxiety. At the house, Christopher was in his study with 3 men I'd never seen before. He looked up when I entered, something dark and dangerous in his eyes that I'd only seen once before, the night he dealt with Brunarelli. "Hannah, these are associates from New York. They have information about a situation we're dealing with." One of the men, older with silver hair and cold eyes, studied me with open assessment. "This is the woman?" "My fiancée," Christopher said, the word carrying weight like a threat, and off limits to speculation or discussion. The man raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just observing. She's pregnant, yes? Congratulations." Every protective instinct I had flared to life. Something about how he said it felt wrong. "Christopher, what's going on?" He came to me, guided me to a chair, knelt beside me the way he had when I told him about the pregnancy. "There's been an attempt to move into our territory again. Not the Yamaguchi this time. Someone else. Someone who's been asking questions about my family. About you." Ice slid down my spine. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest they're looking for leverage, for vulnerabilities they can exploit." The silver-haired man spoke again. "We have intelligence suggesting they're planning something in the next few weeks. Something designed to draw Christopher out, to make him act rashly. Using me," I said flatly. "And the baby. That's the theory we're working with," Christopher confirmed. "Which is why you're not going to the clinic anymore. Not until this is resolved." "Christopher, I can't just stop working." "Yes, you can. And you will." Steel in his voice now. "I'm not negotiating on this, Hannah. You and our daughter are the only things in this world I can't lose. I won't risk either of you to maintain some semblance of normal routine." I wanted to argue. Wanted to insist on my independence, on my right to continue my life despite threats. But looking at his face, at the barely controlled fear there, I recognized this wasn't about controlling me. It was about a man terrified of failing to protect the 2 people who mattered most. "How long?" I asked instead. "However long it takes to eliminate the threat. Days, maybe weeks. And what do I do in the meantime? Hide in this house like a prisoner? You stay safe. You let me handle this." He took my hands. "Please, Hannah, don't fight me on this. Not when the stakes are this high." I looked at the men in his study, at their hard faces and calculating eyes. This was his world. The violence and danger I'd accepted when I chose to love him. But accepting it in theory and living it while 6 months pregnant were very different things. "Okay," I said finally. "But you check in with me. Every day. Multiple times. I need to know you're safe too. Deal." He kissed me, gentle despite the tension radiating through his body, and sent me upstairs with Bruno standing guard outside our bedroom door. That night, Christopher came to bed late, carrying the weight of whatever plans they'd made. I was still awake, hand on my belly, feeling our daughter kick. "She's active tonight," I said, as he slid under the covers. He placed his hand over mine, feeling the movement. "She's strong, like her mother. Tell me honestly, how dangerous is this situation?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Dangerous, but manageable. We have resources, intelligence, allies. We'll end this before it escalates. And if you can't, then I do what I always do. Whatever it takes to protect my family." I rolled to face him, studied his features in the moonlight coming through the window. "I'm scared." "Me too." He pulled me close, careful of my belly. "But we're going to be okay. All 3 of us. I promise you that." I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. Because the alternative, the thought of something happening to Christopher or our daughter, was unbearable. We lay there together, feeling our baby move between us, and I prayed that his promise was one he could keep. The pregnancy advanced with the kind of careful attention that only Christopher's resources could provide. Dr. Carson coordinated with the top maternal fetal specialist in Boston, a woman who'd handled more high-risk diabetic pregnancies than I could count. My glucose levels were monitored obsessively. Every ultrasound was triple-checked. Every symptom documented and analyzed. Christopher's protectiveness reached new heights that bordered on suffocating. He'd negotiated the threat from the rival organization with brutal efficiency, ending it in ways I chose not to examine too closely. But even after that danger passed, he remained hyper-vigilant about my safety and health. I negotiated my way back to the clinic for scheduled appointments only. No emergencies. Sarah covered the unpredictable cases while I handled routine exams and consultations. It wasn't the work I loved most, but it kept me connected to something that was mine while my body transformed into something unrecognizable. By my 7th month, our daughter was making her presence known with constant kicks and movements. Christopher would spend hours with his hand on my belly, talking to her in Italian, making promises about the world he'd build for her. Watching him like that always made my chest ache with how much I loved him. I called my mother on a Sunday evening. The Boston sky rinsed clean by a brief storm. She sounded small through the distance to Arizona, careful with her questions the way people are around fragile things. I told her about the baby's kicks and the way Christopher pressed his palm to my belly like he was memorizing a map. "Send me a picture," she said. And I did. The blurry arc of my body, the crib we hadn't finished. After we hung up, I sat with the quiet. Loving people meant giving the world more ways to break you. Maybe I had known that since childhood. Maybe I was choosing it anyway. Nonna had opinions about everything. The nursery needed different colors. We should choose a saint's name. The baby would be born during a full moon, which meant she'd be strong-willed. Christopher listened with patient amusement while I took notes, trying to keep track of which traditions were negotiable and which would cause family wars. The wedding planning happened around my growing belly. We'd originally discussed waiting until after the baby was born, but Nonna had other ideas. A pregnant bride was blessed, she insisted, and our daughter deserved to be born into a family that was properly united before God. So we planned something small and quick for early fall, before I got too uncomfortable to walk down any aisle. The ultrasound at 30 weeks should have been routine, just another check to confirm everything was progressing normally. Christopher came with me like he always did, holding my hand while the technician moved the probe across my belly, but something in her expression made my stomach clench. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Let me get Dr. Morrison." The specialist appeared within minutes, studying the screen with focused intensity that did nothing to calm my nerves. "The baby's growth has slowed," she said finally. "Not dramatically, but enough that we need to monitor it closely, and your fluid levels are slightly elevated." "What does that mean?" Christopher's grip on my hand had turned painful. "It could be nothing, natural variation. But with your diabetes, we need to be cautious. I want to see you twice a week from now on, daily monitoring of fetal movements, and if anything feels off, even slightly, you come in immediately." Fear settled into my bones and didn't leave. Christopher tried to reassure me, citing statistics and Dr. Morrison's excellent reputation. But I saw the worry in his eyes every time he looked at me, every time he felt our daughter move. The twice-weekly appointments became a ritual. Christopher rearranged his entire schedule around them, refusing to miss a single one. We'd sit in that exam room holding hands while machines monitored our daughter's heartbeat, while doctors measured and prodded and spoke in careful medical terminology. At 33 weeks, Dr. Morrison made the call. "I think we need to deliver soon. Not today, but within the next week or two. The baby's growth has plateaued. She's not in distress yet, but I don't want to wait until she is." "But it's too early," I protested. "She needs more time. She needs to be safe. And right now, the safest place for her is outside, where we can monitor and care for her properly." Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. "We have one of the best NICUs in the country. Babies born at 34, 35 weeks do very well with proper care." Christopher looked at me, waiting for my decision even though we both knew there wasn't really a choice. "Okay," I whispered. "When? I want to try to get you to 34 weeks. That gives us a few more days. But if anything changes, if there's any sign of distress, we move immediately." Those next days crawled by in agonizing slowness. I counted every kick, monitored every shift. Christopher barely left my side, working from home, canceling meetings. Even his family understood that nothing mattered except getting our daughter into the world safely. On a Thursday evening, Exactly 34 weeks and 2 days into my pregnancy, my water broke. I was standing in the nursery, putting away baby clothes that Nona had sent over, felt the gush of fluid and knew immediately what was happening. "Christopher!" My voice came out steadier than I felt. He appeared in the doorway within seconds, took one look at me, and went into action mode. Called Dr. Morrison, grabbed the hospital bag we'd packed weeks ago, got me to the car with calm efficiency that masked what I knew was roaring panic beneath. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur. Contractions started before we even arrived, mild but regular. Christopher held my hand so tight I lost feeling in my fingers. But I didn't complain. We were both terrified. "Doctor." Morrison met us at the entrance with a wheelchair and immediate assessment. "Everything looks good. Baby's heart rate is strong. You're at 3 centimeters already. Let's get you settled and see how this progresses." The labor room was private, equipped with everything necessary for a high-risk delivery. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency, hooking me up to monitors, checking vitals, preparing for whatever came next. Christopher stayed at my side through all of it. When contractions intensified, he counted through breathing exercises. When I got the epidural, he held me still and whispered reassurances. When hours passed with frustratingly slow progress, he never showed impatience or frustration, just constant support. At hour 20, Dr. Morrison checked me again and frowned. "You're stalled at 7 centimeters, and the baby's heart rate is starting to show some concerning patterns. What does that mean?" Christopher asked. "It means we're going to do a C-section. Not because of immediate crisis, but because I don't want to push this and risk real problems. They prepped me for surgery with swift movements." Christopher disappeared to change into scrubs. Within 30 minutes, I was being wheeled into an operating room, bright lights overhead, medical staff surrounding me. Christopher reappeared at my side, masked and gowned, taking my hand. "I'm right here, not going anywhere." I tried to respond, but my throat was too tight with fear. This wasn't how I'd imagined it. Surgery instead of natural birth. Our daughter coming early, needing NICU support. Everything feeling wrong and scary and out of control. "You're doing great, Hannah," Dr. Morrison said from somewhere beyond the surgical drape. "Just a few more minutes." Then I felt pressure, pulling, movement. Christopher squeezed my hand hard. And suddenly, a sound filled the room that made everything else disappear. Our daughter's cry. Loud and strong and absolutely perfect. "She's here," Dr. Morrison announced. "And she's beautiful." They held her up briefly, a tiny squirming thing covered in vernix and blood, before rushing her to the warming table where the NICU team waited. "Is she okay?" I asked, trying to see past all the people. "She's small but mighty," one of the neonatal doctors said. "Good color, good cry, breathing on her own. We'll need to monitor her, but initial signs are excellent." Christopher was crying. I could feel his tears landing on our joined hands. When he looked at me, his face was transformed with joy and relief, and something too big for words. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought her into the world safe. They brought our daughter to me for just a moment before taking her to the NICU. 5 pounds, 2 ounces of perfect human. Dark hair like Christopher's, my nose, eyes that weren't quite focused yet, but seemed to look right through me. "Hello, Lucia," I whispered, using the name we'd chosen weeks ago. "Welcome to the world, baby girl." Then she was gone, surrounded by medical staff who would care for her while they finished my surgery. Christopher stayed with me through the stitches and cleanup, through the transfer to recovery. Then he went to the NICU to be with Lucia while I rested. When he returned hours later, he showed me photos on his phone. Our daughter under warming lights, wires, and monitors attached, looking impossibly small and fragile. "She's doing well," he said. "Breathing on her own, glucose levels stable. The doctor says if she continues like this, she'll be home within 2 weeks." I started crying then, relief and hormones and exhaustion all crashing together. Christopher climbed carefully onto the hospital bed beside me, holding me while I sobbed into his chest. "We made it," I said when I could finally speak. All three of us, he agreed. "And now we get to start the rest of our lives." 2 days later, I was released from the hospital, but Lucia stayed in the NICU. It destroyed me to leave her there, but the staff reassured me this was normal for babies her age. She needed to gain weight, prove she could regulate temperature and maintain glucose levels independently. Christopher drove me home, got me settled, then went immediately back to the hospital to sit with our daughter. He split his time between caring for me and being with Lucia, somehow managing both while running his business remotely. Nonna arrived with food and opinions and gentle bossiness that made me cry with gratitude. She showed me how to use the breast pump, how to manage recovery pain, how to prepare for bringing a tiny human home. On day 12, the NICU doctors cleared Lucia to leave. Christopher brought her home wrapped in the blanket his grandmother had made, placed her carefully in my arms, and we both just stared at her in wonder. This was our family now. Imperfect and complicated, and born out of a storm that had brought us together. But ours. Completely and irrevocably ours. The wedding happened 2 weeks after we brought Lucia home. Nonna had insisted we not wait, that our daughter deserved parents married before God. Christopher and I were too exhausted from sleepless nights to argue. We kept it simple. Just family in Nonna's garden, under the ancient oak trees that had witnessed generations of Ravellini celebrations. I wore a cream dress that fit around my post-pregnancy body without making me feel self-conscious. Christopher wore a dark suit that made his eyes look impossibly deep. And Lucia, barely a month old, slept through the entire ceremony in Sarah's arms. My mother had flown in from Arizona 3 days earlier. Meeting Christopher for the first time while holding her premature granddaughter had been overwhelming for her, but I'd watched him win her over with gentle patience, showing her how to support Lucia's fragile neck, explaining the NICU procedures in terms she could understand. The ceremony itself lasted maybe 20 minutes. A priest who'd known Christopher's family for decades spoke about love and commitment and the sacred bonds of family. When it came time for vows, Christopher held both my hands and spoke with raw honesty that made my throat tight. I promise to protect you and our daughter with everything I have, to build a life where you can both be safe and happy, to love you through every storm that comes, the way you've loved me through mine, to be the man and father you both deserve, even when I fall short, to choose you, every day, for the rest of my life. My own vows felt inadequate by comparison, but I meant every word. I promise to be your partner in everything, light and dark, to stand beside you when the world gets complicated, to raise our daughter knowing the truth about who you are, all of you, and loving you anyway, to choose this life, this family, every single day. When the priest declared us married, Christopher kissed me with tenderness that somehow contained everything we'd been through. The fear and danger and impossible choices that had brought us here. The love that had survived all of it. Lucia woke up crying halfway through the reception, demanding food with impressive lung capacity for someone who'd spent her first weeks connected to monitors. I excused myself to nurse her in Nonna's bedroom, grateful for the quiet. Sarah found me there 20 minutes later. How are you holding up? Exhausted, overwhelmed, happy. I adjusted Lucia against my chest. Is that normal? To feel all of that at once? Perfectly normal. Sarah sat beside me on the bed. You just married a man whose world most people would run from. You have a premature daughter who's defying every odd. You're allowed to feel complicated things. Do you think I'm crazy? For doing this? I think you're brave. And honest about what you're choosing. She touched Lucia's tiny hand. This little one is lucky to have parents who see reality clearly, but love anyway. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of food and family and exhaustion. Christopher rarely left my side, one hand always finding mine, his attention split between me and Lucia. When his uncles tried to pull him aside for business discussions, he politely but firmly refused. Today is for my family. Business can wait. We drove home as the sun set. Lucia secured in her car seat, both of us too tired to speak. At the house, Christopher carried our daughter inside while I followed, my body aching from standing too long. I'll get her settled, he said. You go rest. But I followed him to the nursery anyway, watched him change Lucia's diaper with practiced efficiency, lay her in the crib Nonna had used for him as an infant. He stood there for a long moment, one hand resting gently on her chest, feeling her breathe. She's so small, he whispered. Sometimes I'm terrified I'll do something wrong, that I won't be able to keep her safe. I came up behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist. You're already doing everything right. She's healthy. She's home. She has parents who love her more than anything. She has parents in a dangerous world. She has a father who will move heaven and earth to protect her. That's what matters. He turned in my arms, pulled me close. Thank you for marrying me, for giving me this family, for not running when you had every reason to. Where would I run? You're my home now. We stood there in the nursery, holding each other while our daughter slept, and I thought about how far we'd come. From that night in the storm when Christopher had found me unconscious and changed both our lives, through revelations about his world that should have sent me running, through pregnancy complications and premature birth, through every impossible choice that had led us here. This was our family now, built on honesty about darkness and light, on love that had survived every test thrown at it, on commitment made with open eyes to the reality of what we were choosing. 3 months later, Lucia had caught up developmentally to full-term babies her age. She smiled constantly, especially at Christopher. He would spend hours just holding her, talking to her in Italian, making promises about the world he'd build for her. I'd returned to the clinic part-time, working around Lucia's schedule. Sarah had become her honorary aunt, spoiling her with ridiculous stuffed animals and educational toys she wouldn't use for years. My mother visited monthly, splitting time between Arizona and Boston. She'd made peace with Christopher's world by choosing not to ask questions she didn't want answered. As long as you're happy and safe, she'd told me. That's all a mother can ask. Nonna had fully adopted me as family. Sunday dinners were mandatory, and she'd started teaching me to make Christopher's favorite dishes. The aunts treated Lucia like a princess, fighting over who got to hold her. Life had settled into something resembling normalcy. If you didn't look too closely at the armed security or the business Christopher conducted in his study late at night. One evening, I woke to find our bed empty. The baby monitor showed Lucia sleeping peacefully in her crib. I found Christopher in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair with a book of children's stories in Italian. Couldn't sleep, I asked from the doorway. Just wanted to watch her breathe. He looked up at me. Sometimes I still can't believe she's real, that you're both mine. I crossed to him, settled onto his lap, even though I was too big to fit comfortably. We're yours, both of us. Completely. I know. That's what terrifies me, having something this precious to lose. So don't lose it. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Loving us. Protecting us. Being the impossible man who saved my life and gave me everything I didn't know I needed. He kissed me, soft and slow. And I tasted gratitude and fear and overwhelming love. In the crib, Lucia stirred, making the small sounds that meant she'd wake hungry soon. We stayed there anyway, holding each other in the quiet darkness, listening to our daughter breathe. This was what we'd built together. A family forged in storms and danger and love too stubborn to be sensible. A life that made no sense on paper, but felt right in every way that mattered. I'd collapsed alone in a storm once, ready to die because I'd pushed too hard and ignored too many warnings. Christopher had found me there in the rain, carried me to safety, and somehow along the way we'd found salvation in each other. Now we had Lucia, had this house full of her things and our compromises, had Sunday dinners with Nonna and morning coffees while our daughter napped, had the complicated reality of loving someone whose hands weren't clean, but whose heart was wholly mine. It wasn't perfect. It would never be simple. But looking at Christopher holding me in the nursery, at our daughter sleeping peacefully, at the life we'd built despite every obstacle, I knew I wouldn't change a single choice. The storm had brought us together, and together, we could weather anything.